The Olympic Games has been inseparable from the geopolitical events which mark the relations between participating states, from the infamous Berlin Olympics hosted by Hitler's Germany, to the Munich massacre, to apartheid South Africa's expulsion from Olympic participation, to the boycotts, threatened or carried out, that many nations have made. By the time of the 1980 Winter Olympic Games in Lake Placid, New York, the United States and the Soviet Union, less than 40 years since their alliance defeated Germany in World War II, were bitter Cold War enemies. The world order was dominated by these two superpowers, a struggle between rival economic systems, communism and capitalism, and rival systems of governance, authoritarianism and democracy. Prussian military theorist Karl von Clausewitz famously said that war was the continuation of politics by other means. At the height of the Cold War, politics would be continued by the other means of everything from space technology to popular culture to intellectual games of competitive chess to, of course, international sport, where for decades the Soviet Union and the United States won more medals than any other country, in a tally that began to look a lot like a table of who had the most nuclear warheads. In the aftermath of American defeat in Vietnam and the national trauma of Watergate, the US political mood was characterized by a feeling of impotence, compounded by events like the Iran hostage crisis and the recent energy crisis. In a little over a decade, Americans had gone from landing humans on the moon to questioning whether they could maintain their place in the world. Just weeks before the Winter Olympics began, Jimmy Carter threatened to boycott the Moscow Summer Games. The stated reason? The recent Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, something Jimmy Carter would live to see his own nation do. The Soviets had taken home Olympic ice hockey gold at the previous 4 Olympics, and it seemed to all observers that the US team's mixture of amateur and college players would be no match for the dominant Soviet team. And so it was that before a capacity crowd of 8,500, an underdog team comprised of college and amateur athletes would go up against the regimented sporting machine of Soviet ice hockey. US team member Rod McClanahan told an ESPN documentary in 2004 that on the day of the match, the team had telegrams plastered on their locker room wall, which had poured in from all over the nation, with messages like, "Beat those commie bastards." The score seesawed in the first period, with the Soviets scoring first, the Americans hitting back, the first period ending 2-2 after a thrilling American goal in the final second of the first period. Soviet coach Viktor Tikhonov immediately benched goaltender Vladislav Tretiak for conceding the 2 American goals, replacing him beginning in the second period with backup goaltender Vladimir Mishkin. Tikhonov would later call this move the biggest mistake of his career. The Soviets would dominate the second period, scoring once, bringing scores to a Soviet-led 3-2. In the third period, with 10 minutes remaining, the US would for the first time attain a 4-3 lead thanks to a goal from US team member Mark Johnson, and shortly after that, another from captain Marco Ruzioni. For the remaining 10 minutes, the Soviets fought back ferociously, but the United States was able to maintain its lead. As the clock ticked down, sportscaster Al Michaels famously said, "Do you believe in miracles? Yes." And this is the origin of the name Miracle on Ice. A famous victory for the United States and a match that would boost America's national mood and unleash a wave of patriotism. But it wasn't over. The US would have to go on to beat Finland 2 days later for the medal. When it did so, the victory was solidified. The USA victory in the first weeks of the 1980s was a harbinger for a decade of renewed confidence for America as it entered the Reagan era and the final decade of the Cold War. 11 years after the Miracle on Ice, the Soviet Union would fall. The event has been talked about and studied ever since, voted in several polls as one of the greatest sporting moments, and even some psychological research has used it as a touchstone example of communities pulling together. Research showing that in America, fewer suicides occurred on the day of the match than any other February 22nd ever. Other research has noted the contrast in how America treated its victorious sporting Cold Warriors of the hockey team in comparison to the forgotten veterans of Vietnam. The victory really did give America the chance to feel like winners again. At the 2002 Winter Olympics, the 1980 team had the honour of lighting the cauldron, again buoying a nation's spirits after the
Created using Powtoon.